Sometimes I'd like to smack old age right in the kisser. Ow!
I always get the best parking spot.
I think she needs a little more help.
Monday.
What I really need is a boyfriend that can drive at night.
I can make a fashion statement out of anything.
I will be fabulous.
I have a little crush on my pharmacist.
With Comfort Care at your side, you can live your best life possible. We know families can't be there 24/7, which is why we can help with as much or as little home care as you need. From medication reminders and meal prep to everyday chores and errands, so you can live in your own home on your terms.
I won't let aging stop me from being me.
Call Comfort Care now and let us create your personalized care plan and find the perfect caregiver match.
Can you show that number again? She was texting.
Together with Comfort Care, you can both live your best life possible.
Call Comfort Care at 503-636-0417. You're listening to Aging Today, the podcast where together we explore the options to aging on your terms.
When I get older, losing my hair, many years from now, will you still be sending me a Valentine? Birthday greetings, bottle of wine. If I've been out till 2:45, would you lock the door? Will you still need me? Will you still feed me when I'm 64?
And now the podcast where together we discuss proactive aging on your terms, connecting to the professional advice of our special guests, while creating better days throughout the aging process. Now here's your host, Mark Turnbull.
And welcome to Aging Today. I'm delighted to be your host on Aging Today. This is the podcast where together we explore the many options to aging on your terms. But before we begin today's show, I want to give a kudos to our show sponsor, Comfort Care Home Care of West Lynn. They are the caregivers at Comfort Care that support seniors and their desire to remain independent in their own homes. Comfort Care West Lynn is helping you to live your best life possible. Well, I do want to say to our listening audience that there's a few changes here going on at what was formerly known as Aging in Portland. It is now Aging Today. We are officially no longer on the radio. We are only on a podcast. And for the last 4 years, since 2017, February of 2017, we've had over 150 shows that have been devoted to the aging process. We've had doctors, business owners, lawyers, nonprofits, and many, many other people, educators, authors of books that have been on Aging in Portland, and now we're making a shift over to our podcast, which is Aging Today. And I do want to thank our original radio show host, KKPZ 1330 on the AM dial. Thank you for the last 4 years. But we're not slowing down, and we're going to continue to bring as much information on the aging process to all of our listeners out there. And we're going to do that on Aging Today, the new podcast. But you can find us, and you can find all of the past shows. All you have to do is go to aginginportland.com, or you can go to the new website. And the new website is agingtoday.us. All you got to do is type in www.agingtoday.us, and that will take you to our website. And you can pick up any of the past 150 shows over the last 4 years. And we're very excited to have that much information available to you as we all go through the aging process. I've always said in the past that if you're not too busy being born, we're all busy aging. And we're all at various stages. And that's why we've chosen the name Aging Today, because every day we're aging, and everybody's at a different stage of that process. Well, I do want to also say that if you want to reach out to us, all you have to do is type in Mark and send me an email, mark@agingtoday.us. That is Mark at Aging Today US. And if you have any ideas for shows, I'd love to hear from you, and we can get those guests on the show on the next go around. So thank you again, all of our listeners, for hanging with us, and we're very excited for the future and what we're going to be able to do. The other cool thing about podcasts is that we're not limited to time. We can go as long as we want. We can go as short as we want. And so we're going to have a lot of fun, and we're going to begin the new episode and the new starting point for Aging Today with a very special guest. She came highly recommended to us by Matt Gannon, who, as many of you know, he's our Did You Know guy. And Matt had introduced me to Meagan, and we're very excited to have Meagan Lawler. She is formerly the executive director for the Oregon Mediation Association, and now she's currently in private practice as a clinical psychologist, and I'm assuming she's doing much with mediation. Meagan, welcome to today's show.
Thank you so much for having me, Mark. I'm really excited to be here.
Well, we're excited to have you as well, and actually the topic at hand today is a very important topic, because many of our listeners, as they go through the aging process, find themselves in family conflict, and then when you do get down that slippery slope of conflict, what do you do when no one's listening and everybody's shouting, and they're shouting above at the top of their voice, and then all kinds of things break loose, bad feelings, tension exists in the family, and you've devoted an entire career to mediating. Is that correct?
A great deal of it, yes. Yes.
So for our listening...
We'll say yes.
Okay, that sounds good. So for our listening audience, Meagan, tell us a little bit about your background and how you ended up in being a mediator, and then where you're going with it today.
Okay, I'm happy to do that. So, as Mark mentioned, I am a clinical psychologist, and I have certification in family therapy. So, I've seen a lot of families in conflict. How it relates to the aging process is that along the way, I also did get some additional training in gerontology and taught at Merrillhurst Psychology and Gerontology for over a decade. But what I saw in my work with families, with aging family members, was a couple of things that were actually really heart-wrenching. What I saw is some families got along pretty well until they came to a specific issue, and a lot of it has to do with two basic areas. One is what to do with end-of-life care, and then how to deal with the estate once someone has passed. So I've seen families where, there was a good enough family. Everybody got along pretty well. And they went off and raised their own families. And then towards the end of their parents' life, they come back and these issues rise to the surface that were never resolved from their own childhood. You were mom's favorite, and I don't see why you should get that. So it's very emotionally laden. For 2 years, I volunteered at Clackamas County Small Claims Court. So we were dealing with landlord-tenant issues and barking dogs and tree lines and that. That's two people who don't know each other that come together to resolve a conflict. With the family members, it goes very deep, and it is important to address what the real conflict is. But I'm hoping that through Mark's astute questioning of me that we'll get into some of that. That's just my intro.
And you can be guaranteed that I'm going to ask a lot of great questions. Let's start out with a very basic question. What is a mediator? And for our listening audience, and you shared a little bit of how you got into mediation, but what is a mediator?
Well, By definition and by profession, a mediator is a neutral party who facilitates a conversation among individuals who are in conflict to allow them to come up with the best resolution they can in the situation. So it's a type of referee, but referee calls balls and strikes and such like that. A mediator has another toolkit to get deeper into the origins of the conflict and help the family resolve their issues in their own way. That's a very important aspect of mediation, is there's no arbitration, right? Like I or someone like me doesn't go in and say, okay, yeah, I think he's right and you're wrong, and so I'm going to give him the house.
Yeah, you're not going to pick sides, is what you're saying.
No, absolute neutrality. To the best of everyone's ability. You know, we're human beings, and we see what's going on, but it's professional neutrality. So it's a very studied stance of how we proceed.
And conflict isn't necessarily something to be ashamed of. There's conflict all around us. There's conflict in the world. There's conflict in our families. There's conflict. Anytime you have two people together, you got three opinions, correct?
Correct. Actually, and I think if we all reflect for a moment, we've had situations where we've been in conflict with someone and we've worked through the conflict, and on the other side of it, the relationship was better because we trusted more. We felt that the bond was strong enough to sustain a conflict, and it adds depth and richness to a relationship. It can. Resolved conflict is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and that's your goal. Is that the goal of being a mediator?
Yes, that's the ideal. And if it's not resolved, at least the parties walk away with something they can all live with.
Yeah. And typically, how many sessions does it take to bring, and I'm sure I can probably answer that question, but the depth of the conflict has a lot to do with it, but does it take, on average, maybe 2 or 3 different sessions to resolve conflict?
I would say, yeah, it does depend on the depth of the conflict and the willingness of the participants to engage. The usual process is that the mediator will do, we call it case study background. Basically, we call people up. Most of this is done on Zoom now. We call people up and we hear their side of the story, and we hear everybody's side of the story before we meet.
Okay.
So it's a one-on-one session, completely confidential, where I would talk to each of the parties and find out what is going on for them. Where do they see the conflict, and where do they see a possible resolution? And then after that part is completed, then we get together and as a group. And I have background information then. I have a sense of everybody's sort of willingness to participate. So that is helpful. So I'm not getting a lot of background information that people might disagree with while they're in the room. I've heard everybody's side already. And someone listening to you and what your fear is about the conflict, what you're afraid might happen, I've already addressed all that with each party before we've met. So it doesn't have to come up in the room. That's helpful.
Let me ask you a question in regards to your biases. So as a mediator, how do you we all have biases, correct? And
yes.
as a mediator, you want to do probably the best you can to set your biases aside. How do you go about that process in preparing yourself?
I think that's one of the things that mediators in, consultation with each other talk about a lot. The first thing is noticing that you do have a bias and being very aware and careful about it. The other thing is the rule of mediation is it's the party's decision what they come up with. Even if you think like, wow, I don't know about that, but it doesn't matter what I think, it matters what they think. So if the parties come to an agreement, and generally it's a written agreement that everybody agrees to and signs, and they get to go over it until they all agree it. I may think, wow, that person really got shorted. But if they agree and that's their agreement, it's not my agreement. So the outcome isn't my outcome, it's the party's outcome. So that does help also maintain neutrality.
Yeah, I would think that is really critical to being a good mediator. And we all have biases, but the best, and that's why you're a professional, is that you can set all of those things aside. In your experience over the years, Meagan, and all the mediation that you've done, do you see a pattern in the types of conflicts that you've mediated between families?
No, I wish I could tell you there was a pattern, but every family's conflicted in their own way.
Yeah. What are some of the big stumbling blocks that get in the way of families?
I think it goes back to unresolved issues from childhood with the parents, particularly if they're dividing up property, or thinking that they should have a say in, at the end of life care. There's usually somebody who's really bossy and takes over, and everybody else lets them take over, but gets really upset about it.
Yeah.
And then, I've had one where it was the beach house, and some people had really lovely memories of the beach house and wanted to keep it. And others thought, I don't live in this state and I never had a good time there at all. I hate the ocean. Let's sell it. That kind of thing.
Yeah. And so when you come across, let's take that beach scenario. How would you approach the family, the confliction that's taking place amongst the siblings?
Well, first of all, we'll just put all the ideas up on, say, a whiteboard and say, okay, what's good about keeping the beach house? Why do you want to keep it? What are you don't want the beach house? You don't live here. You never get to use it. What can you do? So there's no limit about ideas about what to do to the beach house. Well, we could keep it and make it a B&B, and then we would have income, and what about the insurance? So no holds barred, just everything about the beach house up, and then go through a process of eliminating, no, we don't want to turn it into a B&B. Okay, we can take that off the table. So if you want to keep it, then how would you be compensated for buying your brother out? This isn't a legal agreement. This is a mediated agreement between family members. Sometimes in something that's quite valuable, for example, a beach house, the mediated agreement, I might say it's a good practice for you to go to an attorney and have that codified. Mm-hmm. But it is a very affordable alternative to litigation, where everybody just gets angrier and angrier, and who wins is the attorney.
Yeah.
Attorneys don't come at me,
You're right.
It's just because they are trained to get their client's best interest pushed through. We don't come from that standpoint. We come from the standpoint, mediators come from the standpoint, you guys can figure this out. What's an option that everybody can live with? Maybe you're not ecstatic about it, but you can live with it and think that it was at least an attempt at fairness. So there is a lot of reconciliation work that also can be done during this.
Yeah, I was going to say there must be some healing also that you're involved with as you mediate between the parties.
Yes, and I can tell you, I just get shivers thinking about it. I have seen some really beautiful reconciliations among family members and forgiveness of past hurts. So sometimes it's just plain miraculous.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? I was thinking in terms of the conflict and why that conflict has been existing. And like you said, it's been there for years. We can go back to our childhood between the siblings, and mom or dad favored one sibling over the other, and that causes tension. And then, you know, when it comes down to the division of the property or the division of the various jewelry or whatever of value, a vase, you know, that is in the home. And, you know, how do you resolve that conflict when, you know, there is this tension between family members over, you know, physical items?
Well, again, I don't resolve it. I facilitate and hold a space where the conversation can happen, even with all the hurts. And, you know, you got the red bike and I wanted it. Or this ring is really important to me. Okay, this ring is really important to me. And there's emotional valence on it, not just a monetary value placed on, say, a piece of jewelry. If you get the ring, then I definitely want that painting, you know, so working through that. But again, I'm not an arbitrator. I don't decide. And we sit there until the families can live with what they come up with.
Yeah. And so not only, you know, are you, you know, resolving conflict, but you're helping them to negotiate.
Yes, it's all about negotiation.
Yeah.
It's all about negotiation. It's not about I win, you lose. That's litigation. This is everybody gets something, what they want, and they can live with it. So it is definitely all about negotiation.
Yeah. And I would imagine that you have many relationships with attorney firms. Do attorneys, do they revel in the conflict, or do they say, hey, this isn't good and you need to go see Meagan Lawler?
Yes. You know, I'm just throwing out the different roles and not saying anything, because the role of an attorney is to get the best deal for their client. And some attorneys practice mediation, and attorneys say this to me because I know many attorneys, you know, like it is a hard workaround for them. It's not their training instinct to sit back and let people negotiate and not have an opinion.
Sure.
So, you know, attorneys don't come at me, please, because you say that about yourselves. So it is helpful sometimes not to have the attorney mindset, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. You know, I would also think that one of the things that families can do in preparation for the transition when mom and dad are no longer on this earth is that the parents would take the bull by the horns and get the family together and see if they can resolve some conflict, or you know, where does a will come into play, and the parents having, you know, sitting down and having this conversation with the children so that they have their best wishes known.
Yes, that would be lovely, but that's not generally what happens. And, you know, I don't know where you want to put this, but
yeah, go ahead.
Matt asked me to come up with one of these did you know questions, and I gave him one, and it's like 68% of adults in America die without a will.
Wow, that's pretty high.
It's amazing and not good. So I don't know what I'm a psychologist, but I still don't know what the psychological mechanism is there, because maybe if you don't have a will, then you won't die. I don't know. Or they don't want to take the conflict on because, you know, there's no one there to facilitate it. And I do get that, because as a rule, most of us are pretty conflict avoidant.
Yeah.
On the big things. People will step into a conflict on a small thing that doesn't matter, but the big things and relationships like that, nobody really knows where to start. So if we don't talk about it, then maybe it just will go away. But it doesn't go away without,
I would think that that's the biggest mistakes that families make is the parents, believe in their children so much that their children are, perfect little angels and they're all going to get along. And that just isn't the case.
Wrong.
Yeah.
I have seen really nice families go to ground on this.
Yeah.
I have seen, really lovely families get so destroyed by this. You would never believe that, a family that loved each other this much and got along so well could, stop talking to each other and become estranged over a beach house. But it happens.
Yeah. Yeah. It's sad.
Example. Yeah.
It's sad. And it could be easily resolved if the parents would just, take it more seriously and sit down with all the children all together. And in this day and age, it's a lot easier, even if you're out of state, because we got Zoom and other forms of having these meetings together to where they can look them in the eye and have a very safe conversation.
Yes. Well, it's not really safe. It's emotionally fraught.
Okay.
And
I stand corrected. Well, it can. I'm sure it can be.
It can be.
Yeah.
Or the parents can do what I've seen in very high asset families is this is where it's good to work with an attorney. Just have a trust in place, and then have it all clear in advance, and be fair, and just have it all resolved. Because I'm not an attorney, and so I'm just saying this, but this is it goes into probate, and here's what happens if you die without a will. If you have parents, it goes to your parents. If your parents are no longer living, it goes to your children. If your children, you don't have any, or they're no longer living, then it goes to your siblings. If you don't have siblings, it goes to the state. It's just but it's a long process to get that resolved. So, you may not like, I had a case where a woman couldn't stand her brother. She fought so terribly with with them over the estate of her family's property, and finally ended up buying them out, but refused to get a will. So even though she's really not talking to them, says I'll never talk to them again, without any will in place, the parents are dead. She has no children. The brothers, who she says she can't stand, will inherit the property. So something to think about.
Yeah. Well, and then the bottom line is, somebody's got to have the courage to step up, have a conversation, communicate, have a family meeting. And while the parents are still alive, let your wishes be known in front of all the siblings, so that one of the things that I see that happens often is that the daughter will say to her brother, or the brother will say to the daughter in various scenarios, well, Mom said that I could have this. Well, maybe she did 15 years ago, and then Mom changed her mind and then forgot that she said that you could have this, and then told the other sibling that they can have it. How do you resolve conflict like that?
Well, again, you put it up what it is, what the emotional value of it is, what the monetary value is, and what would be a fair compensation to the others if someone got the item. Again, that's for the family to decide. What Mark, this well too. At later stages of dementia, people get very giving awayness.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, have this. Oh, have that. Oh, sure, I'm going to give you that. And then 4 people have been promised the same sports car or something, and it's just like, so it just has to go up on the whiteboard and just with honesty and clarity. I mean, some people want the ring for the emotional value. It's been in the family maybe for 4 or 5 generations. And some goes, that's a honking diamond. I mean, that's worth a lot. I'm not just giving that to you.
Yeah.
So, it's complicated. I'm not pretending it's not.
Do you find in mediation that the wealthier the estate is, that there's more conflict, or do you find it is equal?
Here's what, in my personal experience, I find people with greater resources and assets that know the value of them, and they have legal understanding of how to protect them. But that does not address the emotional issues. So that can come down to just the emotional. I think people who have a great deal of assets also have them because they know how to protect them. So we don't see, so many people dying without some kind of trust or family trust or some kind of legal clarity in place around it. But it still can happen. I still have experience where there were quite a lot of assets and there was no will in place. Also, sometimes the children don't know how, because it was not polite to talk about money, and it's not polite to talk about death. And so, sometimes adult children are shocked either at the amount of assets that are to be inherited or the lack thereof. So some adult children assume that they will inherit quite a great deal, and they don't. And so that we're all different situations. There's not, a common scenario. That's what makes it so interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything that surprises you out there with conflict, the types of conflict? Or have you seen it all?
Well, I'm sure if I tell you I've seen it all, I'm going to get really...
You're going to get blindsided.
So I've seen a lot.
Yeah.
I'm sure I haven't seen everything. Yeah.
Well, wouldn't it be lovely if we could just all get along?
Wouldn't it? But yeah, that's a good segue, because one of the things that I did want to talk about in mediation and conflict resolution is something that a very well-known, world-famous mediator, Bill Urey from Harvard, said, are you a heart of peace or are you a heart at war? So a lot comes down to the individual. If you want to have conflict, you will find no shortage of it. If you want to have peace, it's a better life. And this does not mean to capitulate to everyone and be a doormat, but, taking a step back and sort of seeing, what's this really worth to me? And again, also, what is the relationship worth to me? We have some small minor conflicts that occur that, among strangers, among drivers, among neighbors. And someone can really want to be a heart at war, want to have the conflict, get energized by the conflict. So in some sense, it's up to people how they want to be in the world. A question that I heard one time by someone that I thought was just amazing. I heard it so many years ago. It was, do you want to be right or do you want to be effective? And I think that's a good question to ask ourselves. There are, in relationships that aren't that important to us, why would we, we can just not be right, and that will be fine, and the world won't end. You can step back and be kind instead of being right,
Right. I totally agree with that, and I wish that we had more of that attitude in this world.
We'll hear more from Mark Turnbull and his guest Meagan Lawler in just a moment as they discuss the process of mediation here on Aging Today.
Did you know we don't see the world as it is? We see the world as we are. A quote from our special guest on Aging Today, Dr. Meagan Lawler, clinical psychologist. Dr. Lawler's formula, clues for successful conflict resolution, is as follows. C. Communicate respectfully and honestly. L. Listen to the other. Really listen. Do not listen to prepare for rebuttal. U. Understand the other's perspective. Ask clarifying questions. You do not have to agree with their perspective. You merely need to understand what their perspective is. Let go of all assumptions and come to the table with an open heart and an open mind. E. Explore options and solutions. S. So, how did we do? What remains unfinished? This Did You Know moment is brought to you by Comfort Care Home Care of West Lynn. Call today at 503-636-0417.
And now, more with Mark Turnbull and his guest Meagan Lawler, a clinical psychologist in private practice, helping us better understand the process of mediation. Let's rejoin them here on Aging Today.
And I like what you said earlier about is your heart at peace? And I want you to comment on that a little bit, because I think sometimes we think that having a peaceful heart, and you kind of alluded to it, is that means that we can be so laissez-faire, hands-off, and we allow people to walk all over us. And that's not what being at peace means. Or, the meek shall inherit the world. Meek really doesn't mean that you're going to be a doormat.
No, it's maybe many people can relate to this. I experienced it after my father died, and then all of a sudden death was real to me. He was the first person that I was close to that died. I mean, I knew other people died. I knew death was a real thing. But when my father died, it was like, oh, death is real. And then it aligned my priorities so well. It's like, oh, that's not important. Or what is important in my life, Like in the last 4 hours that he died, he was at St. Peter's in Lacey in Washington, and his hospital room had a panoramic vision of the Cascades. And you just saw the clouds go by, and, it was his last few hours, and there was no more meds to give and no more treatments to give. And we just, were at the end. And then the panorama of the mountains and the clouds, and it was like, wow, the whole scope of life. What's really important? What is important to you became really apparent. And then, of course, I remembered that for a couple months, and then I went back to being my regular self. But I never forgot that I had once had a grander scope of what is really important in life. Are these little conflicts really important or not? So it's important to keep that in mind. The heart of peace is like a willingness to see all sides and not just be right. Like a lot of times when I'm coaching people to prepare for conflict, and that's one thing I do, Mark, want to talk about, is how to prepare for conflict as if it's a sacred thing. But in preparing for conflict, to think about, can you tell me the other person's perspective? And they go, well, I think they want that because this, and I'm not going to let that happen, boy. And I said, okay, can you tell them that you understand where they're coming from? Oh, no, because then I'm telling them they're right.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, no, not in the least. All you're doing is letting them know that you understand the perspective they're holding in regard to this issue. You're not agreeing with them. You're just telling them you understand. And it goes back to the fundamentals for, all of us for being a heart at peace is to really listen to people, what they're saying, and not listen to do a rebuttal. I mean, I noticed a complete shift in when I would do my, explanation for small claims court, because you only got 2 hours to resolve that issue, whatever it is. Boom. Otherwise, you're going to court. Mm-hmm. And so what I would say to people, please listen with the intention to understand, which is not the same as agree, but to understand, not to, make your case for a rebuttal. And that is where I have seen when people really listen to understand, a shift happens in both parties. It's like, oh, well, they really do have a perspective. Let me contemplate that. And the other one feels heard, because a lot of the conflicts that get so escalated and agitated is because people feel they're being discounted and not heard and not respected. That's the main thing I hear is you don't respect me.
Yeah.
So I got to fight for my rights. But if you respect, not necessarily agree with the other person's opinion, there's a softening that takes place where the door opens for some peace to come in.
Yeah. And what you're doing is you're using this acronym CLUES, correct?
Yeah.
As a way to help people prepare for conflict. And the letter C stands for communicate respectfully and honestly.
Yes. Respect is really important. Both verbal and nonverbal, like no eye rolling.
Yeah.
Then we're done, then we should come back another day, because I like to, prepare people to, as if this is something really important, and relationship growth or maintenance or establishment is, something of great value. Relationships are really something of great value, and they should be maintained and honored respectfully. So if you can come to the table with, you know what you want, but you're willing to listen, and you're willing to hear the other side and to really know what the other side is saying. It doesn't mean you're giving away your position, though you often do soften it when you come in that way of respect, because if everybody's being respectful, the whole tension lessens.
And we could use that lesson in our world today with all the tension that is out there.
Yes, there's a credible amount of divisiveness and not listening, and if I'm louder, that makes me right type of thing.
Yeah. And we tend to, and that's what we're doing in the streets today, is we're shouting down people, and we're not respectfully listening to another viewpoint or another worldview. And I don't know where we lost our manners in this world, but somehow we have. And it's spilling over into the families. Or this conflict at a smaller scale is spilling into the streets from the families, and nobody is listening. Nobody is talking, and some people are not allowed to talk, and others are allowed to talk, and it depends on how loud you are. You're absolutely correct.
And I mean, when you say manners, it's not in the form of some antiquated etiquette, like what fork to use. I feel like the basic respect for another human being's worth on the planet is equal to your own, even if you don't agree with how they think. And I think in heart of hearts, most people do want to be good people, and they just sometimes get a little off the path.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I'm thinking in terms of as we, the aging process, and then when mom and dad are passing on and there's the conflict between the siblings, it goes, some of this conflict, like you said earlier, is that it goes way back into the childhood, and everybody's worldview of that particular event could be different, and other people experienced it differently and feeling slighted. And so if we just would open up our eyes, close our mouths, you got 2 ears, you got one mouth, and listen to the other side and communicate respectively and honestly. And then the second letter in your acronym for clues is the letter L. Listen to them. Listen, really listen, and do not listen to prepare for rebuttal. And I am probably the greatest sinner of all. I'm always listening so that I can have my rebuttal quickly to quickly shout down that idea. And you're saying don't do that. And that's a discipline.
It is a discipline, but it's like most disciplines, the rewards are great.
Mm-hmm. And I think it comes from an internal desire to be right, which you were alluding to earlier. Do you want to be right, or do you want to be effective? And when there's that urgency inside of us that we've got to prove our worth or our value or that we're right, and maybe you were the voice that wasn't heard in the earlier childhood, and this is now the final time when you can speak out loudly. I can see the temptation there as well.
Yeah, that is why another aspect of mediation is when I do the individual conversations with family members, that's just between they and I, and completely confidential, so none of it gets brought up in the mediation. It does give people a chance to address the grievances that they have or feel. Because when we go into the mediation table, we used to call it table, now we call it Zoom, but we're really looking at present time. Really want people to be in present time and find solutions in present time. But if people feel that they haven't been heard, then they'll want to be heard at the table, which is quite often counterproductive, because you did get the red bike and I got the mopey green bike, and it just derails it. So
and it's been happening all my life. You've always got the best clothes. I got the hand-me-downs.
Right.
Yeah.
So that is why, we do that advanced talking to people, so I can, hear all parties equally. And then when we move into the mediation with the negotiation, we're dealing in present time.
Yeah.
There is really a beach house, and it really does need to be addressed. Okay. What we will do with it. And the you wanted the green bike and got the red one is not relevant to what we're doing now. So.
Yeah. Well, I love your acronym clues. So we've talked about the C, communicate respectfully and honestly. The L is for listen to the other. Really listen. Do not listen to prepare for rebuttal. And I'm looking at myself for that because well, I'm working on that one. Okay, what's the U stand for, Meagan?
So we addressed this a little bit slightly earlier when we said understand the other's perspective. So ask clarifying questions. You don't have to agree with their perspective. You just need to understand what their perspective is. And this is a big one. Let go of all assumptions and come to the table with an open heart and an open mind. So one of the things that, another thing as not listening as a disciplined listener is also we assume all kinds of stuff about what other people's motivations are. And then we get like, you can get perceptual whiplash, when you find out the truth. We have a whole narrative in our head why, why you do that thing. And when you just say to someone, and I love the expression, get curious, not furious, because it'll just stop you in your tracks. It's like, okay, I'm getting furious now. I need to get curious, And I said, can I ask you something? Why do you, I'm making something up. Why do you put the milk carton back in the refrigerator when it's almost empty? It's just so annoying. Or here's a better one. Why do you squeeze the toothpaste in the middle? I can't stand it. I need a divorce. I mean, and the people go, oh, I'm so sorry. I wasn't aware. You assume that someone's trying to get you by doing the toothpaste thing, and they're actually just oblivious and just say, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes, I do that. I apologize. I'll be more careful." And then poof, the whole story's gone. Or why somebody did something. We make up all kind of stories that have no basis in reality. We're all very creative.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And you also made a statement, I love your little quote, we don't see the world as it is, we see it as we are.
Yes.
And that kind of goes along with this understand the other's perspective.
Yes, and that's actually from neurobiology. It's like we take in stimulus, so we're having, we meet, and I see you, and I hear you. But all of that is being processed through my processor. So I'm seeing what I'm processing of you, but that's not you. That's what I'm taking in and deciding on information to attend to or disregard. But you're a picture in my head. But you're not a picture in my head. You're your own person. So it's really important to keep in mind that we can't mind read and we don't know other people's motivations, unless they tell us. You walk in a bank and say, hey, fill this bag with money, then they've stated a clear intention, but it's generally not that obvious, so asking clarifying questions is really helpful.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So, okay, so let's move on to the E. We've got C is communicate, L is listen, U is understand, and what does E stand for?
So E is explore options and solutions. So that's in mediation where we put everything up on the board and discuss. Okay, what are you willing to? What are our options? Just name everything. I had a funny story when I was at Clackamas doing small claims mediation. I also was doing dog mediations, neighbors and dogs, and there was a really nice guy with a lot of forbearance, and he did. So you see, we do notice. It's not like we are neutral in the formal discipline, but we do notice he was a pretty nice guy, and he had a lot of patience. And the neighbor dog barked a lot, and it was there's I think you're allowed a half hour of barking a day or something. It's defined in the dog ordinance code. But the woman's solution to the problem was that he should wear earbuds all day long. He should wear, put something in his ears so he couldn't hear her dog barking. So we put it up as an option, but obviously that was not what we were going to go with at the end of the day. He didn't really feel like he wanted to wear hearing plugs all day long. So, but we explore options. That was her option. We had the counter option from him. And then we have the parties work together on the solutions. So they're their solutions. There was a church with lights shining on someone's apartment window, and, they didn't feel they should have to move him, and he didn't. And so it ended up that they just decided to leave the lights where they were, but changed their directionality slightly. But, they both came in saying, no, these are our lights and we have a right to our lights. And he's saying, I can't sleep at night, so I got a right to sleep too. So, at the end, they came up with the idea, okay, we can take the lights and directionally change them so they're not shining on your bedroom. So,
did they ever think of curtains as a solution?
I'm sure all the things were. Everything we didn't like curtains, so it had to be agreeable to all. So
yeah. Well, they make tinted windows these days too. That would have been another solution. But that's your point, is that there's lots of different solutions that maybe someone else hasn't heard of, and there may be costs associated with the solutions too.
Yeah.
And who's going to pay for that?
Yeah, it's surprising, the amount of, if people are in the discipline and the formal setting of mediation, so there's a certain gravitas to it, right? You'd be really surprised at and they feel that they're being respected and listened to. All of a sudden, this creative energy enters the room about how to solve the problem. And, people have come up with and become very open to working with each other. And that's always a very delightful part of the process of mediation, where the mediator can step back and the two parties go, okay, well, about the tree roots on the driveway, we could do this. Well, all right, I'd be willing to pay for that part of it, but I'll fix the fence. And we're like, oh, here we go. They're solving the problems themselves. So that's ideal. But setting the formal context of respect, having someone there that, slightly monitoring, but it's always very wonderful when the parties take over and start the mediation and the problem solving and the negotiation themselves. Then good, I've set the stage for this to happen.
All right, well, let's move on to the letter S. So let me just reiterate to our listening audience, the letter C stands for communicate, L is listen, U is understand, E is for explore, and now we're ready for S. What is S?
So S is, so how do we do?
Yeah. How are we doing?
Yeah, how are we doing? So, how do we do? Does everyone feel they were heard? Is this an agreement? We really, when we write a negotiated, mediated agreement, we're very cautious with the language. They use only the words the parties used. Everybody reads it again so that they feel good about it, and then everyone signs off on it. And then we add a contingency for, if someone isn't adhering to their part of the agreement, what is the next step?
Okay.
So the other part is, what remains unfinished. So, of course, a lifetime of family feelings aren't resolved in a couple of hours. That's clear. But can we live with what we've gotten so far? Can we go on in a good way, not be estranged, talk to one another, and maybe to figure out the rest of it by ourselves? Now that we know that we can figure something out, we have some confidence moving forward. Maybe we can figure out the next hurdle or conflict that comes up. So I also want to say it's very interesting in this process is sometimes in the context of the mediation, things are resolved, and sometimes they're not. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the parties can't shift. So we always say to people, okay, we need to step back and maybe, regroup at another time. But that doesn't mean you can't talk to each other during the time. And often I've found, that someone who really was hard set on having their way or the highway in the mediation process, which of course derails it. And then we just need to stop because there's no point to continue. And that's kind of a mediator call too. that they'll like walk away and think about it for a while, a couple hours, a couple days, a couple weeks maybe, and come back to the table and say, I've shifted on my position. I am now willing to do this. So it doesn't always miraculously happen in the room, though it does. And that's wonderful. Sometimes people take a little while to be more interested in negotiation and not just holding on to their point of positionality.
I would think that many or most, or maybe that's just me, I'm not opposed to having conflict. I think conflict is just part of being a human being. But I think that one of the things that I would want at the end, as my parents pass on, is to be at peace with the conflict. And am I right to say that I can be at peace with the conflict between my siblings? And that doesn't mean that I have to invest the rest of my life seeing them. Am I at peace, or can I be at peace by resolving all of the issues on the table and then just move on with my life? Is that fair to say?
Yes, it's fair. And it's what, as a psychologist, I would say is what a developmentally more mature person is willing to do, is to say, I'm weighing all this and my heart at peace and my feeling of peace with myself, peace with others, is more important to me than getting the ring.
Yeah.
I like the ring. It's a pretty ring. My sibs are going to give me $5,000 to compensate for the value, and hey, I would have liked it, but I would rather have a peaceful heart in the world, and than to keep up the struggle over a ring I'll put in a jewelry box.
Yeah.
My peaceful heart is more valuable to me.
Yeah. How do you get there? Because, some people may just not even think like that. I tend to, my personal being as I want to be at peace. And peace is more important than things. But I'll have to admit, even though I want to be at peace, sometimes, when other people get their way and it really gets in my craw, and then it goes back to the rebuttal, then I guess, doesn't it? Where we it's almost sometimes better to be right than sometimes you just got to let things go.
Yeah, I think what people probably do but aren't aware of is, or maybe only some slightly conscious of, is they evaluate the value of the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So for high value, this is not a reflection on the value of anyone's beauty of their immortal soul, but just in a relationship situation is like, is my heart at peace? Like, it goes back to, do you want to be right or do you want to be effective? It's kind of the same lines. Like, okay, they can have their way. We'll get this type of coffee machine as opposed to the other. They're my coworker, and I like the Keurig, but if they want the drip, it's not worth a battle to me. It's kind of a reflection of the value of the relationship, but also the value of the self-esteem of the individual involved.
Mm-hmm.
We find that people that feel that they never get their needs met are more willing to pull out the desire for a battle than people who are like, win some, lose some, let them have the drip coffee machine. What's it to me?
Yeah.
Are people that more often get their needs met or know how to get their own needs met and are, good at self-care, and, they eat right, they sleep right, they have friends, they laugh, that they don't want to get it all twisted up behind small stuff. I think that's one of the things that, is interesting to address is like, what is the unmet need that causes conflict? Which is really what is the heart of the conflict. The heart of the conflict may not be the ring. the heart of the conflict may be something quite different, often surprising.
Mm-hmm. Maybe it's feeling that's being slighted throughout your childhood and your adult years, and you just never felt like you earned, or you feel like you have the respect of your siblings.
Yeah. And so I'm gonna stand on this position and not move, because you never respected me, and now you're gonna hear me and you're gonna respect me.
And you're gonna pay for it.
You're gonna pay for it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so as a mediator, and I'm sure you've come across those times when people do express their emotions that way. Now, go ahead and make my day. You're going to pay for it. How, as a mediator, how do you resolve that conflict?
This is what most mediators would do. So, it's always fluid, and you're always assessing where they at, how's this going. But it's fine to end a mediation. And it's fine to say, it looks like we can't resolve this today. And I'm sorry. I'm always here if you want to take another stab at it. I wouldn't keep it going to the painful place. You know what I'm saying? There's no joy in, there's no value in that. If someone is really, 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 really set on their position and they're not going to budge, and it's just a way of throwing their weight around, that's not mediation. That's something else. So, sometimes during the course, if people get really triggered and angered, you said, do you need a break? Do you need to go outside and take a walk? Come back in a half hour. Sometimes that works, but if someone's really just stuck on being right, that's not mediation. So it's the professional thing to do, is to not call it a mediation. You'll just say, oh, guess not everybody's ready for us to sit down and negotiate today, but I'm hopeful that in future we can, and just let it go.
And if you don't, we're going to have an intervention.
No, everybody.
That just threw gas on the fire, didn't I?
Everybody's got free will. You've got free will to be miserable if you want to.
Yeah. All right. Well, Meagan, we're up against the end of the hour. Is there anything that you want to add to mediation, being a mediator, and helping families to resolve conflict?
I guess I just want to say that if mediation is something to consider when you are having family conflict. It is a lot less expensive than litigation, and it often leads to repairing families rather than destroying families.
And if a family finds themselves in that position, where do you counsel them to go? Now, you were formerly you were the executive director of the Oregon Mediation Association. So there's a group out there. Is that a good place for people to start?
There you can go there, and they do have a directory, and then also mediate.com is a very highly respected organization based out of Eugene. They do a lot of training. There's also a list of people that are mediators there. What I would say to people is do a little research, reconnaissance, do a little bit of due diligence. Like in all professions, there are people that are absolutely amazing and brilliant, and then there are people that are not. As a mediator, I always would want you to have the best experience possible. I think mediation is underutilized, as a way to solve problems in a effective and affordable way that doesn't involve people going at each other through expensive lawyers, where usually the lawyer's the big winner. We know that from divorce and other situations. So I think people are getting more aware of mediation, but I still get people go, "Oh, meditation, no mediation, Mediation? Oh, meditation? No. So I wish that it were more well known and that people would feel comfortable using it more. That's my great wish for mediation. But I've seen miracles happen, so I just wanted to leave on a good note because, yeah.
Well, and that's why we have you on the show, to bring that awareness to our listening audience. And I think that, one thing I want my listeners to go away with is that, conflict is inevitable.
Yeah.
And you're not a bad person because you have conflict. I think the goal is to resolve conflict. And that should be, we should all have enough self-awareness that there is conflict within us, or there's conflict between family members. And from there, let's see that if we can resolve those matters. And I know that, our tension has been so deep and so wide that we can't bridge that gap together. So let's bring in Meagan Lawler.
Yes, that is one of the things that as mediated professionals, we talk about the divisiveness in society right now. And, how ready we are to fight rather than to listen. So I think, we wish for everyone to have a heart at peace so we can have a society at peace where, people really can truly reach out and help and care about one another and not get embroiled in things that at the end of the day are maybe not even that important.
All right. Is there anything else that you want to communicate? Let's go over the acronym one more time as we close out. C stands for communicate. And what does L stand for?
To listen, really listen to the other one, and try listen with the intention to understand, not to rebut.
Okay, and then U?
To understand the other person's perspective, really understand it, and to be aware that you're not lessening yourself, you're not agreeing with them, you're just being flexible in your mind by understanding the other person's perspective. Doesn't mean that you agree. It just means that you understand where they're coming from. So mind flexibility is a good thing.
All right. And the letter E?
Is to explore options and solutions that usually to, parties that are willing and in the frame of mind to mediate can come up with amazing options and solutions, out of the box ideas that work for everyone, at least in part, so that people can agree.
All right. Well, just for our listening audience, just to remind you, we've been talking with Meagan Lawler. She's formerly the executive director for the Oregon Mediation Association, and you're now in private practice, correct?
I am. Yeah.
And you've got enough clients. You don't need any more. Is that correct? Or are you always ready to take on a few more?
I can. I'm pretty busy, but I could take on in minimum. But I'm sure you're going to edit this part out. It's just like I do want to use this as a marketing tool for me because I don't want to take on that many. But I do have time for the occasional, mediation.
Well, I trust that our listening audience, if they have any questions, can they communicate with you?
Yes, they can contact me by my email, which is Meagan, MEAGAN, 17, Lawler, LAWLER, @gmail.com.
All right. Well, once again, Meagan, thank you so much for being on Aging Today. It was a delight to have you. And maybe we can get you back on because I know that conflict is all around us and we need as many skills as we can have to communicate more effectively and to listen more intently and help each of us to understand other people's worldviews and perspectives. Amen to that?
Amen to that. And it's been my great pleasure. Thank you so much for asking me.
All right. And I do want to thank our show sponsor, Comfort Care Home Care of West Lynn. The Comfort Care team at West Lynn is devoted to assisting you to live your best life possible. This is Mark Turnbull, your host. Thank you for tuning in to Aging Today, the podcast where together we do explore the options of aging on your terms. Join us again next week for another lively discussion on aging today. And our guest next week will be Elaine Sanchez from Caregiver Help. Remember, we're all in the process of aging, and as we age, we really are better together. So stay young at heart.
You make me feel so young. You make me feel like spring has sprung. And every time I see your face, I'm such a happy individual. The moment that you speak, I want to go play hide and seek. I want to go and bounce the moon just like a toy balloon. Well, you and I are just like a couple of tots running across the meadow, picking up lots of forget-me-nots. So you made me feel so young. You made me feel there are songs to be sung, bells to be rung, and a wonderful fling to be flung. And even when I'm old and gray.
You've been listening to Aging Today, where together we explore the options to aging on your terms. Join Mark and his guest next week for another lively discussion on proactively aging on your terms, connecting you to the professional advice of his special guests, with the goal of creating better days throughout the aging process. Your host has been Mark Turnbull. Join Mark and his guests every week on Aging Today, your podcast to exploring your options for aging on your terms.
And even when I'm old and gray, you make me feel the way I feel today. 'Cause you make me feel so. You make me feel so. You make me feel so young. So young. You make me feel so young. You make me feel so young.